Hey, it's Tim with the University of Vinyl, back today with a brand new mastering engineer video in my kind of continuing series highlighting different mastering engineers and some of the distinctive albums that they're responsible for mastering. Today's episode is going to feature Greg Fulginiti. Greg Fulginiti had a 30-year career. He originally started out at Sterling Sound in the very early 1970s. He was a protege of the great Bob Ludwig. Ludwig basically took him under his wing and taught him the entire mastering process. He would eventually move to the West Coast and worked with Artisan Sound Recorders. Artisan Sound Recorders was based in the Valley. It was a counterpart, another boutique agency along with Kendon Recorders. And Greg Fulginiti found himself at the center of the universe, in Hollywood and the recording industry in the 1980s. In fact, one of his proteges was the famous producer Keith Olsen. Keith Olsen worked with everybody from the Grateful Dead to Fleetwood Mac to Ozzy Osbourne. Olsen gave Greg Fulginiti the nickname the Pope of Hollywood. So he had a very long career. He eventually left the West Coast and moved back to work with Bob Ludwig again at Masterdisk in New York. Eventually retiring from the industry back in 1996. Fulginiti is known for a huge soundstage. Things were mastered hot. What they say always, a mastering engineer will tell you, their job is to master something as loud as possible as long as it still sounds good. Now, there were famously the loudness wars, but that actually morphed into the CD era, into the 90s, where overcompression and too much loudness was kind of the earmark of that era. But before that, in the 80s, we had, that was the era of the famous, the Phil Collins drum sound, the gated reverb. I will say, on the Greg Fulginiti albums that I'm going to feature today, I don't have that huge 80s overproduction, but I do see a very slick commercial sound that frankly is pleasing to the ears as far as I'm concerned. The main components of that kind of commercial sound with Fulginiti, there was a very, very large sound stage. Things were mastered hot. Incredible separation of instruments, and a particular drum sound. The drums were the same bone dry drum sound, so very kind of a clinical sound as far as the drums were concerned. In his long career, Greg Fulginiti mastered everything from jazz to hair metal to straight up rock and roll, country western, and new wave. In July of 1981, one of the biggest crossover stars from Nashville put out a new album called Step by Step. That was none other than Eddie Rabbitt. Eddie Rabbitt was an interesting guy. He started as a songwriter in Nashville. He wrote Kentucky Rain, which of course Elvis recorded. And then another big hit, Pure Love, was recorded by Ronnie Millsap. So that's how Rabbitt kind of entered the business. He did have a fantastic voice. He definitely was a big crossover star. This album, the title track, Went to #1 on the country charts in 1981, and eventually hit #5 on the Billboard Hot 100. So an amazing crossover artist. This thing had 3 singles. They all 3 hit over on the Billboard Hot 100. This featured the bass player from Toto, David Hungate, who was a big session player in the late 1970s and into the 80s, eventually based out of Nashville. Eddie Rabbitt, he died quite young. He developed lung cancer in, I think it was 1997, and he was dead a year later. Left behind a string of platinum albums, lots of success, great singer, songwriter, and this was mastered by Greg Fulginiti. It sounds fantastic. This is not something that I would reach for every day, but I happened to have it in the collection and did a little research, and lo and behold, this was also mastered by the person I'm featuring today. This is a U.S. first pressing on Elektra, and it does feature the Artisan Sound Recorders etching in the dead wax, along with GF for Greg Fulginiti, right next to that Artisan Sound Recorders little logo. From crossover country to new wave, Greg Fulginiti mastered the 3rd Wayne Chung album, Points on a Curve. This was released in 1983. This was a huge album for Wayne Chung. Of course, this has the big hit Dance Hall Days. It was all over MTV. It's an atmospheric song. This pressing sounds amazing. This was on Geffen. Again, with Artisan Sound Recorders logo and the dead wax and GF. Other songs, Don't Let Go is amazing. Wayne Chung were an interesting band. They also had success with that, I think it was the next album, To Live and Die in LA, the soundtrack. Really, really good, solid soundtrack with, again, they kind of were known for kind of their atmospheric, moody songs. Of course, programmed drum beats from the mid-'80s were prevalent, but really good synth work and good guitar as well. That is the 1983 album mastered by Greg Fulginiti, Points on a Curve, Wang Chung. The next album I'm going to show is one of the best sounding albums that I have in my collection, and I'm talking audiophile pressings, standard domestic U.S. pressings, etc. And that is the strange 1985 album from Joe Walsh called The Confessor. This was produced by Keith Olsen. It was pressed at Artisan Sound Recorders, mastered. It was mastered at Artisan Sound Recorders by Greg Fulginiti, and the real redeeming quality of this album is the incredible sound quality and the incredible title track, The Confessor. That was on, of course, the Warner Brothers label, and I can't say much else about the album. It's it's a middling Joe Walsh effort. I think at that point in time, 5 years after the breakup of the Eagles, he had huge success, was maybe coasting a little bit. I know there were quite a bit of issues with substance abuse in that time period for Walsh. But take a listen to The Confessor sometime. And this album is a dollar bin album. If there was ever a dollar bin album, it's got to be The Confessor by Joe Walsh. Not one of his stronger efforts, but I still will put this on just to listen to The Confessor occasionally, because the sound just blows me away. Huge, huge, huge soundstage on this one. Also produced by Keith Olsen good friend of Sammy Hagar. That is the 1982 album, Standing Hampton. Now, I have never been in the Hagar camp when we talk about Van Halen. I've always been preferential to David Lee Roth. But, you know, there are some good songs and good albums that Hagar put out before he joined Van Halen. And this could be a high water mark for me. I love this album. I love the sound of it. Again, huge soundstage, great separation of instruments. This has got some love songs and kind of power ballads, and then some out-and-out rockers. I'll Fall in Love Again, the lead song on the album. That's something that after Hagar joined Van Halen, there were a couple songs in the earlier years of the Van Hagar years that Van Halen would play, and it would be usually I'll Fall in Love Again and Can't Drive 55. So that is the lead-off track. There's Only One Way to Rock, Baby's on Fire, great song, kind of a slow burner. Can't Get Loose, another great song. Heavy Metal. Side 1 is a fantastic rock side of music. If you haven't heard this or haven't heard it lately, give it another spin. This is an easy record to find, mastered by Greg Fulginiti. Which label was this on? Let's take a look. Also on Geffen, and you'll see the Artisan Sound Recorders. Their little logo kind of looks like a little spaceship taking off. It's very, very distinctive. If you've seen it, you know it. And then typically, if Fulginiti mastered it, he's got a GF, usually only on one side, right next to the right of that Artisan Sound Recorders logo. Last but certainly not least is the third Chris Isaak album called Heart-Shaped World. Gorgeous cover. Fantastic rockabilly, of course, Roy Orbison-esque music. This is a fantastic album. It was the third album that Chris Isaak and his backing band, kind of known as Silvertone, put out. And this thing hit huge. It took a while to hit, but there was the song Wicked Game, of course, on this album. Now, Wicked Game, an instrumental version of that song, appeared on the David Lynch 1990 film Wild at Heart. And that is when people started to take note of that song. The incredible kind of surf guitar, atmospheric guitar line on that was courtesy of Isaac's lead guitar player at the time. That was James Calvin Wilsey. Wilsey would continue into the next album, but he eventually butted heads with Isaak, left the band, died in 2018. Long issues with drugs and alcohol, but man, that Wicked Game guitar line is just an amazing song. Other songs of note on this album, of course, Wrong to Love You, Forever Young, In the Heat of the Jungle. This was on the Reprise label. And this is not an easy record to find. I actually found this about a month ago now. I talked about this album in another video. Actually, I think I found this thing in early March. You'll be shocked if you go look it up on Discogs. It's typically going for over $90, well into the hundreds now. Just not an easy album to find. I also want to find, hopefully, San Francisco Days. I used to have Isaac's entire catalog on CD back in the day. But, you know, Chris Isaak, fantastic voice, Kind of a throwback to the late 1950s as far as the sound of his band, Silvertone. And this was the third album from Isaac. That is Heart-Shaped World, mastered by Greg Fulginiti. This thing sounds amazing. I'm really, really happy to have this. That's it for today, and the mastering engineer Greg Fulginiti. One thing I don't have that I didn't show because I don't have it. Greg Fulginiti mastered the Nick of Time album from Bonnie Raitt. So, imagine being involved in that project and how many records that thing sold. That was a huge, huge, huge comeback for Bonnie Raitt. I think in 1989, 1990. Also difficult to find and moving up the dollar chart on Discogs. That's Nick of Time, another notable project that Greg Fulginiti was involved with. Check out all the other Mastering Engineer videos that I've shot, and those are in a playlist. I'm going to drop a link to the playlist in today's description. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll be back soon with a new video. Take care.